History is a battlefield of ideas, where the clash of minds often outweighs the clash of swords. Wars are not always won by the strongest armies or the mightiest weapons. Instead, the course of history has been shaped by those who dared to think differently, to outmaneuver their enemies when outnumbered, and to rewrite the rules of war itself. From ancient empires to modern warfare, there have been moments when the tide of battle turned not because of brute force, but because of brilliance, a single decision, a clever deception, or an ingenious strategy that tipped the scales against all odds. In this journey through time, we'll explore the minds of legendary leaders like Hannibal, who encircled his enemies in one of the most studied maneuvers in military history. We'll stand alongside generals like Napoleon, who turned a battlefield into a chessboard and his soldiers into pawns of destiny. We'll uncover how intelligence and creativity shattered the expectations of warfare, from the narrow pass of Thermopylae to the towering walls of Constantinople, from the deserts of North Africa to the icy waters of the Pacific. These are not just stories of armies and battles. They're lessons in ingenuity, persistence, and the unyielding human spirit. Each tale we're about to uncover isn't just a moment in history, it's a testament to the power of strategy, proving that victory belongs not to the side with the most soldiers, but to the side with the sharpest minds. So sit back, because what you're about to witness is a masterclass in tactical brilliance that reshaped the fate of nations. This is the story of the greatest tactical battles in history, where the impossible became reality. Wars aren't just fought with weapons, they're won with minds. Throughout history, the most iconic battles weren't decided by sheer numbers or brute force but by strategy, innovation, and brilliant tactics that defied the odds. Imagine being outnumbered 10-1 and still walking away victorious. How did they do it? In this video, we're diving deep into the greatest tactical battles in history. The moments where leaders outsmarted their enemies and changed the fate of nations. From ancient empires to modern warfare, these are the stories of brilliance under pressure, of bold decisions that turned defeat into triumph. Stick around, because this isn't just history, it's a masterclass in outthinking the odds. Let's uncover the secrets of strategy that shaped the world. The ancient world was a theater of great ambitions and fierce rivalries, where every battle was a gamble with the fate of civilizations at stake. These weren't just military engagements, they were masterclasses in strategy, ingenuity, and leadership, where the brilliance of a few could outshine the brute strength of thousands. Let's journey into the heart of three defining moments in ancient warfare that forever changed the course of history. Picture a massive Persian force landing on the shores of Greece, ready to crush the small and fragmented city-states. At their head stood the mighty Persian Empire, with an army so vast that it dwarfed the Athenian defenders. Greece seemed doomed. But then came Miltiades, the Athenian general whose strategy would turn the tide. Facing an enemy with superior numbers and firepower, he devised a plan that was as audacious as it was brilliant. Instead of deploying his forces evenly, Miltiades thinned out the center of his line and concentrated his strongest warriors on the flanks. When the Persians advanced, the Athenian center retreated slightly, luring the invaders into a trap. The Greek flanks closed in like a deadly pincer, encircling the Persian army and cutting them down. It was a shocking victory for the Athenians, a victory that didn't just save Athens from destruction but preserved the very idea of Greek culture. Imagine standing on the plains of Marathon, surrounded by the chaos of battle, and witnessing a moment that would echo through history. Without this victory, the ideas of democracy, philosophy, and art that flourished in Greece might have been snuffed out before they could inspire the world. The Battle of Marathon was more than a military triumph. It was the defense of an idea, one that would shape the future of Western civilization. Now, shift your focus to the Second Punic War and the genius of Hannibal Barca, one of the most brilliant military minds of all time. The Roman Republic was at the height of its power, fielding an army of nearly 80,000 soldiers to crush Hannibal's Carthaginian forces, which numbered fewer than half that. The odds were overwhelming, but Hannibal didn't just fight the battle, he rewrote the rules of warfare. Hannibal deployed his troops in a crescent formation, with his weaker forces at the center and his stronger units on the flanks. As the massive Roman army pushed forward, eager to break through the center, they fell into Hannibal's trap. His flanks closed in, surrounding the Romans in a devastating double envelopment maneuver. The chaos and panic among the Roman soldiers were unimaginable. In a single day, over 50,000 Roman soldiers were killed, one of the worst defeats in Roman history. But this wasn't just a massacre, it was a masterpiece. The Battle of Cannae became the ultimate example of tactical brilliance, studied by generals and military strategists for centuries. From Napoleon to modern military academies, Hannibal's strategy at Cannae has been dissected, analyzed, and admired. Imagine the shockwaves that rippled through Rome after that day, as the invincible Republic realized it had met a mind it couldn't match. Our final stop in the ancient world takes us to the Gallic Wars, where Julius Caesar faced his most formidable opponent, Vercingetorix, the leader of the Gallic tribes. The stage was set at Alesia, a fortress perched on a hill and surrounded by rugged terrain. Caesar's army was outnumbered, with tens of thousands of Gauls inside the city and an even larger relief force approaching from the outside. Most generals would have retreated, but Caesar wasn't most generals. In a move that showcased the ingenuity of Roman engineering, Caesar ordered the construction of two sets of fortifications. One set of walls surrounded the city to keep the defenders trapped, while the other faced outward to protect against the approaching relief army. For weeks, the Romans endured relentless attacks from both sides, holding their ground with incredible discipline and resourcefulness. Finally, the Gallic relief army launched a massive assault, hoping to break through Caesar's outer defenses. The Romans held firm, repelling wave after wave of attackers. Inside the city, hunger and desperation took their toll on the defenders. When the dust settled, Caesar emerged victorious. The siege of Alesia was more than just a military triumph. It marked the end of Gallic resistance and solidified Caesar's legacy as one of the greatest military leaders in history. Imagine the tension on that battlefield, with Caesar's men fighting on two fronts, knowing that failure meant total annihilation. The brilliance of his strategy, combined with the discipline of his soldiers, turned what seemed like certain defeat into a resounding victory. Through these three battles, Marathon, Cannae, and Alesia, the ancient world proved that strategy and innovation could triumph over overwhelming odds. These stories remind us that even in the chaos of war, it's the mind that leads the way to victory. The medieval era, spanning roughly 1,000 years, was a time of knights, castles, and kingdoms fighting for supremacy. It was also an era when strategic brilliance could change the fate of nations. In this section, we explore three defining conflicts, battles where tactics and innovation triumphed over brute strength and shaped the course of history. The Battle of Hastings was a pivotal moment in English history, fought on October 14, 1066. This was no ordinary clash of armies, it was the culmination of a high-stakes power struggle. Following the death of King Edward the Confessor, Harold II of England claimed the throne, but his claim was contested by William, Duke of Normandy, who asserted that Edward had promised him the crown. William's determination to press his claim led to one of the most consequential invasions in history. On the battlefield near Hastings, Harold's army formed a formidable shield wall, a dense defensive formation of interlocked shields that had been the hallmark of Anglo-Saxon warfare. Against this stood William's Norman forces, an impressive mix of heavily armored knights, archers, and infantry. The initial Norman assaults were repelled by the steadfast English shield wall, and it seemed as though Harold might hold the line. But William's brilliance lay in his ability to adapt. He ordered his troops to perform a feigned retreat, pretending to flee in panic. This ruse lured the English soldiers out of their defensive positions as they pursued the retreating Normans. At the crucial moment, William's forces turned and counterattacked, catching the English soldiers off guard and dismantling their shield wall. By the end of the day, Harold lay dead, struck by an arrow to the eye, and the English army was in disarray. This victory secured William's claim to the throne, ushering in Norman rule over England. The consequences were profound. Language, architecture, and governance were all transformed under Norman influence. The Battle of Hastings wasn't just a military triumph, it was the birth of a new England, one shaped by William's vision and cunning. Picture the battlefield, the clash of swords, the cries of retreat suddenly replaced by triumphant cheers as William's troops turned the tide of history. The muddy fields of Agincourt bore witness to one of the most extraordinary victories in military history. On October 25, 1415, King Henry V of England led a vastly outnumbered and exhausted army against a much larger French force during the 100 Years' War. The odds were overwhelmingly in favor of the French, whose knights and men-at-arms were considered the finest warriors of the age. Henry's army, weakened by disease and fatigue, relied heavily on a new weapon that would revolutionize medieval warfare, the longbow. Henry strategically positioned his forces on a narrow battlefield, flanked by dense woods. This forced the French to attack head-on, neutralizing their numerical advantage. As the French knights advanced through the rain-soaked terrain, they became bogged down in the deep mud, their heavy armor weighing them down. At that moment, the English longbowmen unleashed a deadly hail of arrows. The longbows, with their extraordinary range and armor-piercing power, decimated the French ranks before they could even engage in melee combat. Despite their superior numbers, the French knights were trapped in a chaotic and brutal slaughter. By the battle's end, thousands of French soldiers lay dead, while English casualties were remarkably low. Henry's victory at Agincourt was not just a triumph of strategy, but also a testament to the power of technological and tactical innovation. This battle demonstrated that discipline and ingenuity could overcome even the most daunting odds. Imagine the scene, the steady rhythm of arrows flying through the air, the clash of steel in the mud, and the cries of triumph as Henry led his army to one of history's most celebrated victories. The fall of Constantinople was a watershed moment in world history, marking the end of the Byzantine Empire and the beginning of a new era. For centuries, Constantinople had stood as a symbol of Christian resilience and a bastion of the Eastern Roman Empire. But by 1453, it was a shadow of its former glory, surrounded by the growing power of the Ottoman Empire. Sultan Mehmed II, just 21 years old, sought to achieve what no leader before him had: the conquest of Constantinople. His campaign was marked by one of the most innovative uses of technology in medieval warfare. Central to Mehmed's strategy was the deployment of massive cannons, including the legendary Orban bombard, a colossal weapon capable of firing enormous stone projectiles over long distances. For weeks, Mehmed's forces bombarded Constantinople's formidable walls, which had withstood sieges for over a millennium. The relentless artillery fire created breaches in the ancient fortifications, demoralizing the defenders. The Ottomans also used an audacious naval strategy, transporting ships overland to bypass the city's chain-protected harbor. On May 29, 1453, after weeks of bombardment and fierce fighting, the Ottomans launched a final assault. Despite desperate resistance, the city fell, and Sultan Mehmed entered Constantinople in triumph. The fall of Constantinople not only marked the end of the Byzantine Empire but also heralded the rise of the Ottoman Empire as a dominant global power. It also signaled the end of the medieval era, as the age of gunpowder and cannons began to reshape warfare and the world. Picture the drama of those final moments: the thundering roar of cannons, the crumbling of ancient walls, and the sight of Ottoman banners rising above a city that had stood for over 1,000 years. It was more than the fall of a city, it was the dawn of a new age. The early modern era ushered in new advancements in warfare, marking a transition from medieval strategies to more sophisticated and nuanced tactics. This was a time when the very nature of combat evolved. Gunpowder, cannons, and larger, more organized armies became the norm. The balance of power in Europe and beyond was in flux, and military leaders had to adapt to rapidly changing technologies and complex political landscapes. This section explores three of the most important battles in early modern history, where strategy, innovation, and leadership changed the course of nations and empires. These battles not only determined the outcomes of wars but also left lasting legacies on military thought, politics, and global power structures. In the late 16th century, the Mediterranean Sea was a battleground where the power of two great empires, Ottoman Turkey and the Christian powers of Europe, clashed for control. The Ottoman Empire, expanding relentlessly, posed a grave threat to European stability, and in response, Pope Pius V formed the Holy League, an alliance of Catholic powers including Spain, Venice, and the Papal States. The Ottomans had established naval dominance over the Mediterranean, and the Holy League needed a decisive victory to halt their expansion. On October 7, 1571, the Holy League's fleet, commanded by Don John of Austria, met the Ottomans in the Gulf of Patras in what would become one of the most consequential naval battles in history. The Holy League's forces, despite being outnumbered, used innovative tactics to gain the upper hand. Their secret weapon was the galleass, a hybrid vessel combining the agility of a galley with the firepower of a warship, mounted with numerous cannons to unleash a devastating barrage at close range. These ships were strategically positioned at the front of the fleet, where they could deliver crushing firepower to the approaching Ottoman ships. The Ottoman fleet, despite its larger size and more experienced crews, could not withstand the relentless barrage. The battle saw the destruction of over half of the Ottoman fleet, and the Holy League captured or sunk 150 Ottoman ships. This battle was not just a military victory, it was a cultural one. It effectively halted the Ottoman Empire's expansion into Western Europe, securing the future of Christian Europe. Moreover, the Battle of Lepanto marked the end of the dominance of oar-powered galleys in naval warfare, heralding the rise of sailing ships and a new age of naval strategy. Imagine the thunderous sounds of cannon fire and the smoke that filled the air as the Ottoman fleet crumbled. This battle was a crucial turning point in the struggle for control of the Mediterranean. A century later, the landscape of warfare had changed, but the stakes remained high. In 1704, the War of the Spanish Succession was raging across Europe, and France, under the leadership of King Louis XIV, was striving to secure the throne of Spain for his grandson, Philip V. The Franco-Bavarian alliance, under the command of Marshal Villeroy, was in a dominant position, threatening to overwhelm the European powers opposed to France. The fate of Europe lay in the balance, and the man chosen to stop the French advance was John Churchill, the Duke of Marlborough. The Battle of Blenheim, fought on August 13, 1704, became one of the most remarkable displays of military coordination and strategic genius. With a combined army of British, Dutch, and Austrian forces, Marlborough faced a numerically superior Franco-Bavarian army. But Marlborough's understanding of the battlefield and his ability to manipulate his enemy's movements turned the tide. Instead of engaging the French head-on, Marlborough employed a brilliant deception. He feigned weakness in the center while concealing his true strength on the flanks. This drew the French into a vulnerable position. Marlborough then struck decisively at their exposed flanks, creating a pincer movement that encircled the enemy and led to a devastating defeat. What made this battle stand out was Marlborough's ability to inspire his troops, coordinate with his allies, and execute a plan that exploited the enemy's weaknesses. His use of misdirection and timely strikes effectively crippled the French army, and by the end of the battle, the French were in full retreat. The victory at Blenheim was not just a military triumph, it had profound political ramifications. The French were forced to reconsider their expansionist ambitions, and the Battle of Blenheim marked a turning point in the war, weakening French influence in Europe and solidifying Marlborough's reputation as one of the greatest military commanders in history. Imagine the tension on the battlefield as thousands of soldiers maneuvered into position, the sound of cannons booming across the field, and the realization that the course of history was being altered with each passing moment. As the 18th century wore on, the world was on the brink of revolutionary change. The American colonies, having grown increasingly dissatisfied with British rule, sought independence and freedom. The American Revolutionary War, which had begun in 1775, was still in its early stages by 1777, and both sides were testing each other's resolve. The British, under General John Burgoyne, sought to strike a decisive blow by advancing south from Canada, aiming to cut off New England from the rest of the colonies. However, the American forces, under the leadership of Generals Horatio Gates and Benedict Arnold, had other ideas. The Battle of Saratoga, fought in two engagements on September 19 and October 7, 1777, marked the turning point of the Revolution. Burgoyne's campaign had stalled due to logistical challenges, difficult terrain, and American resistance. The Americans, well entrenched and strategically positioned, harassed Burgoyne's forces relentlessly, using superior knowledge of the land and an ability to maneuver swiftly. In the second phase of the battle at Bemis Heights, General Benedict Arnold led a daring charge against the British lines, decisively breaking their defenses. Trapped and surrounded, Burgoyne was forced to surrender his entire army, approximately 6,000 men. This victory was more than a military triumph for the Americans. It was a game-changer in the broader conflict. The surrender of Burgoyne's army sent shockwaves through Britain and demonstrated that the American cause could succeed. More importantly, it convinced France to openly enter the war, providing crucial military and financial support that helped turn the tide against the British. The victory at Saratoga effectively secured American independence, and its legacy can still be felt today in the enduring spirit of revolution and self-determination. Picture the determination on the faces of the American soldiers, the clashing of bayonets, and the ultimate realization that their victory was no longer a distant dream but a tangible reality. In each of these battles, strategy and innovation overcame seemingly insurmountable odds. Whether on the seas at Lepanto, the fields of Blenheim, or the forests of Saratoga, brilliant military minds employed tactics that reshaped the future of their respective nations. These were not merely victories, they were watershed moments that changed the course of history, leaving behind valuable lessons in leadership, coordination, and the power of strategy. As we explore the intricacies of these battles, we gain not only a greater understanding of military history but also a deeper appreciation for the art of warfare and the impact it has on the shaping of the world. The Industrial Revolution not only transformed economies but fundamentally reshaped how wars were fought. By the 19th and early 20th centuries, the world had witnessed the rapid development of military technology, including firearms, artillery, ironclad ships, and railways. Armies grew larger, and the very nature of warfare became more complex, as the coordination of large numbers of troops, the use of industrial resources, and the ability to move forces quickly across vast distances became central to military strategy. In this section, we explore three of the most significant battles that defined the industrial era, highlighting the revolutionary tactics, innovations, and strategic decisions that changed the face of warfare forever. These were not just battles for territory but also clashes of industrial might, ingenuity, and the new strategic thinking that arose from the technological advancements of the time. The outcomes of these battles had profound effects on the world, shaping the future of nations, global power structures, and the way wars would be fought in the 20th century and beyond. After years of dominance in Europe, Napoleon Bonaparte's reign came to an explosive end at the Battle of Waterloo. The battle was not only a climactic confrontation between Napoleon and the Allied forces but also the culmination of decades of political and military maneuvering. Napoleon, after being exiled to Elba, had made a dramatic return to France, reclaiming power and hoping to restore his empire. The European powers, however, were determined to end his rule once and for all. The Battle of Waterloo, fought on June 18, 1815, was the decisive engagement that would ultimately decide the future of Europe for the next century. Napoleon's strategy at Waterloo was bold, aggressive, and built on his reputation for battlefield brilliance. He intended to strike quickly and decisively, hoping to destroy the Allied forces before they could fully unite. He faced an Allied army led by the Duke of Wellington, consisting of British, Dutch, Belgian, and German troops, who were entrenched on the defensive positions of the Mont Saint-Jean Ridge. Despite being outnumbered, Napoleon planned to break the Allied lines with a series of well-coordinated attacks. However, Wellington used the terrain to his advantage, placing his forces on the reverse slope of the ridge, which kept them hidden from the French. This clever positioning allowed the Allies to conserve their strength while the French army grew weary from continuous attacks. In the early stages of the battle, Napoleon made several attempts to break the Allied lines, but each was repelled, and the French forces suffered heavy losses. Meanwhile, the arrival of the Prussian forces under General Blücher was a turning point. Their timely arrival on Napoleon's right flank disrupted the French forces and turned the tide of the battle. As the Prussians advanced, the French army began to collapse under the pressure, and by the afternoon, Napoleon's forces were in full retreat. The defeat at Waterloo marked the end of Napoleon's reign and his military dominance in Europe, signaling a new era of peace and stability under the Congress of Vienna. Waterloo was a decisive moment in history. It not only ended Napoleon's imperial ambitions but also reshaped the political landscape of Europe. The battle demonstrated the importance of effective coordination between Allied forces, the use of terrain in defensive positions, and the role of timely reinforcements. It was a pivotal moment in military history, marking the transition from the era of Napoleonic warfare to a new balance of power in Europe that would persist for much of the 19th century. The echoes of this battle would resonate in the years to come, influencing future military strategy and shaping the course of European diplomacy for generations. The American Civil War was a brutal and defining conflict in the history of the United States. It pitted the Confederacy, fighting to preserve the institution of slavery, against the Union, which sought to preserve the nation's unity. By 1863, the Confederate Army, led by General Robert E. Lee, had won several significant victories and was on the offensive. The Union Army, under the command of General George G. Meade, was determined to stop Lee's advance. The Battle of Gettysburg, fought from July 1 to July 3, 1863, would prove to be the turning point in the war, shifting the momentum in favor of the Union. The battle took place in the rolling hills of southern Pennsylvania, where Lee sought to deliver a decisive blow to the Union forces. He hoped that a victory on Union soil would force the northern states to seek peace and potentially win foreign recognition for the Confederacy. The Union, however, held strong defensive positions on the high ground of Cemetery Hill and Cemetery Ridge. The battle began with the Confederates pushing the Union forces back on the first day but not fully breaking their lines. By the second day, the Union Army had reinforced its positions, and fierce fighting ensued along key locations like Little Round Top and Devil's Den. On the third day, Lee made his most famous and costly move, Pickett's Charge. Lee ordered a full-scale assault on the center of the Union line, hoping to break through. However, the Union forces, well-positioned and heavily entrenched, withstood the charge and inflicted devastating casualties on the Confederate forces. The failure of Pickett's charge marked the high-water mark of the Confederacy's invasion of the North. By the end of the battle, Lee was forced to retreat, and the Confederacy had suffered a crippling defeat. Gettysburg marked a turning point in the Civil War, both militarily and symbolically. It was the first significant defeat for Lee and the Confederate Army, and it shattered their hopes of a decisive victory on Northern soil. The Union's victory at Gettysburg, along with the fall of Vicksburg on the same day, gave the North a much-needed morale boost and was instrumental in securing foreign support for the Union cause. This battle demonstrated the importance of holding defensive positions, the devastating consequences of ill-planned frontal assaults, and the crucial role of leadership and morale in battle. It was a moment that not only determined the future of the Civil War but also the future of the United States as a unified nation. In the early 20th century, warfare was increasingly defined by technological advancements. The Russo-Japanese War, fought between the Russian Empire and the Empire of Japan, was one of the first modern wars that fully showcased the impact of industrialization on military strategy. The Siege of Port Arthur, which lasted from August 1904 to January 1905, was a dramatic and hard-fought battle that illustrated the power of modern siege tactics, artillery, and naval warfare. Port Arthur, located on the Liaodong Peninsula in Manchuria, was a key strategic port for the Russian Navy, and its capture by the Japanese would significantly alter the balance of power in East Asia. The siege was a battle of endurance, innovation, and attrition. The Japanese, under General Nogi Mersuk, laid siege to the heavily fortified Russian naval base, which was defended by General Alexei Stessel. The Russians were ill-prepared for the intensity of the siege and the technological superiority of the Japanese forces. The Japanese utilized modern artillery and innovative siege tactics, including the construction of extensive trenches, to gradually encircle the Russian position. At the same time, Japanese naval forces cut off Russian reinforcements and supplies, forcing the defenders into a state of constant vulnerability. The Japanese siege lasted for months, with the defenders suffering from hunger, disease, and constant bombardment. Despite the Russian efforts to break the siege, the Japanese maintained their grip on the port and eventually forced the surrender of the Russian forces in January 1905. The fall of Port Arthur marked a critical moment in the Russo-Japanese War and established Japan as a rising military power on the global stage. It also signaled the decline of Russian influence in East Asia and foreshadowed the political turmoil that would engulf Russia in the years leading up to the Russian Revolution of 1917. The Siege of Port Arthur was a significant moment in military history, demonstrating the power of modern artillery, the effectiveness of well-coordinated siege tactics, and the strategic importance of cutting off an enemy's supply lines. The battle also showed the growing influence of industrialized nations in shaping the outcome of wars, as technological innovation became an increasingly decisive factor. The Japanese victory at Port Arthur was not just a military triumph, but a signal that Japan was emerging as a global power capable of challenging Western empires. The siege also foreshadowed the modern battles of World War I, where industrial-scale warfare and technological innovation would become central to the conflict. These three battles, from the fall of Napoleon to the strategic innovations of Gettysburg and the modern siege warfare of Port Arthur, illustrate the dramatic evolution of warfare in the industrial era. With each conflict, new technologies and tactics emerged, reshaping the way wars were fought and the outcomes of history. The industrial era marked a time when military leaders had to adapt quickly to technological advances, and the battles fought during this period were often as much about innovation as they were about military strength. These key moments remind us of the power of strategy, the importance of technological superiority, and the ever-evolving nature of warfare. The 20th century marked a seismic shift in how wars were fought. As global conflicts erupted across the globe, advancements in technology, intelligence, and warfare strategy redefined military tactics and ultimately reshaped the modern world. From the devastating battles of World War II to the Revolutionary Gulf War, each conflict demonstrated a new set of principles in military strategy and a deepening reliance on technology. This section delves into the battles that not only defined the outcome of some of the most significant wars in history, but also laid the foundation for how wars would be fought in the 21st century. The three pivotal events explored here, Stalingrad, Midway, and Desert Storm, represent the dramatic changes in warfare, from brutal urban combat and intelligence-driven strategies to the dawn of precision warfare, illustrating the rapid evolution of military tactics and technologies in modern warfare. The Battle of Stalingrad stands as one of the most iconic and brutal engagements of World War II. It was not just a military conflict but a battle for survival, a fight that would ultimately shape the fate of nations and change the course of the war. In the summer of 1942, Adolf Hitler's forces launched Operation Barbarossa with the goal of conquering the Soviet Union and securing vital resources. Among the most critical objectives was Stalingrad, a city located on the Volga River that held both strategic importance and symbolic value, bearing the name of Soviet leader Joseph Stalin. Hitler believed that capturing Stalingrad would be a decisive blow to Soviet morale and would halt their resistance. However, what Hitler underestimated was the tenacity and resolve of the Soviet Red Army, led by General Vasily Zhukov. What began as a traditional siege evolved into one of the most brutal urban warfare campaigns in history. The city was reduced to rubble as German forces relentlessly bombarded it, attempting to break the Soviet will. But rather than retreat, the Soviets adapted to the close-quarter combat and turned the urban terrain into a weapon. Every building, every street, became a battlefield, and the Soviet forces implemented a strategy of attrition, allowing the Germans to advance into the city before striking back with devastating counterattacks. The Soviet tactic of encirclement, most notably with the launching of Operation Uranus in November 1942, was the game-changer. With the help of weather and terrain, the Soviets trapped the German Sixth Army in Stalingrad, cutting off their supply lines and leaving them to fight a desperate battle for survival. The Germans, under the command of General Friedrich Paulus, found themselves hemmed in and unable to break free. Starvation, disease, and the brutal winter conditions further depleted the German forces, and after months of fighting, the Sixth Army finally surrendered in February 1943. The consequences of Stalingrad were monumental. It was the first significant defeat for Nazi Germany, and its impact reverberated across Europe. The loss shattered the myth of Nazi invincibility and gave the Soviet Union a decisive morale boost. More importantly, it marked the beginning of the end for Germany on the Eastern Front. From Stalingrad onwards, the Soviet Red Army would go on the offensive, pushing the Germans all the way back to Berlin. The Battle of Stalingrad demonstrated the effectiveness of encirclement as a tactic and the importance of fighting on favorable terrain, but most importantly, it highlighted the role of perseverance and adaptation in the face of overwhelming odds. In the Pacific theater of World War II, the Battle of Midway was a turning point, marking a dramatic shift in naval power and signaling the beginning of the United States' ascendancy in the Pacific. In early 1942, after the devastating attack on Pearl Harbor, the Japanese Imperial Navy was on the offensive, planning to expand further into the Pacific and strike a decisive blow against the United States. The Japanese aimed to seize Midway Atoll, a strategic base that would give them control over the Pacific and neutralize U.S. forces in the region. However, what the Japanese didn't anticipate was the United States' superior intelligence capabilities. Through code-breaking efforts, American cryptographers had intercepted Japanese communications, revealing the planned attack on Midway. With this invaluable information, Admiral Chester W. Nimitz was able to set a trap for the Japanese fleet. Rather than waiting for the attack, Nimitz positioned his forces in a way that would allow them to ambush the Japanese. The battle itself was a masterclass in tactical warfare. The U.S. Navy, despite being outnumbered, used a combination of surprise, coordination, and technological advantage to devastating effect. American bombers, launched from aircraft carriers, successfully attacked the Japanese fleet, sinking 4 of Japan's aircraft carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, each of which played a crucial role in Japan's naval operations. The loss of these carriers, along with their aircraft and experienced pilots, crippled the Japanese Navy and dealt a significant blow to their ability to continue their expansion in the Pacific. The Battle of Midway was pivotal for several reasons. First, it was the first major defeat for the Japanese Navy, and it marked the turning point in the Pacific War. The loss of their carriers severely hampered Japan's offensive capabilities, while the U.S. gained critical momentum. The battle also demonstrated the importance of intelligence and the ability to outthink the enemy, rather than relying solely on firepower. Midway showcased the growing role of aircraft carriers in naval warfare, a trend that would continue throughout the 20th century. The success of the U.S. Navy at Midway changed the course of the war, setting the stage for the Allied push across the Pacific towards Japan. Fast forward to the Gulf War in 1991, and we see an entirely different kind of conflict, one that relies on cutting-edge technology, intelligence, and precision. Operation Desert Storm, the ground phase of the Gulf War, was a demonstration of modern warfare at its most advanced, where the United States and its coalition partners, including Saudi Arabia and the United Kingdom, faced off against Saddam Hussein's Iraq. The war was the result of Iraq's invasion of Kuwait and the subsequent international demand for Iraq's withdrawal. The Gulf War was significant because it was the first conflict in which the full might of the U.S. military's technological superiority was on display. Prior to the ground offensive, the U.S. launched an intense 42-day air campaign, bombing Iraq's military infrastructure with unparalleled precision. The use of GPS-guided bombs, stealth aircraft, and sophisticated surveillance systems allowed the U.S. to strike targets with near-surgical accuracy. Rather than indiscriminate bombing, Desert Storm relied on intelligence to target key military assets, such as command centers, radar installations, and weapons depots. This precision approach not only minimized civilian casualties but also maximized military effectiveness. When the ground invasion began in late February 1991, the overwhelming power of the coalition forces, supported by advanced technology and well-coordinated tactics, led to a rapid and decisive victory. In just 100 hours, the Iraqi forces were routed, and Kuwait was liberated. The speed and efficiency of the campaign demonstrated the devastating effect of modern technology on warfare. It showcased the shift away from traditional battles and toward high-tech, fast-paced, and precise operations that could achieve strategic objectives with minimal loss of life. Operation Desert Storm marked a new era in warfare, where information, intelligence, and technology played a central role in military strategy. The success of Desert Storm proved that advanced technologies, including satellite communications, GPS, and real-time surveillance, could change the dynamics of battle. It demonstrated the growing reliance on precision strikes and maneuverability in modern combat. More than just a military victory, Desert Storm signaled a new chapter in how wars would be fought in the future, where technological dominance would determine the victor. The battles and operations discussed in this section, from the brutal urban warfare of Stalingrad to the technological precision of Desert Storm, highlight the evolution of military tactics throughout the 20th century. Each conflict represents a shift in how battles were fought, from the traditional tactics of World War II to the high-tech, information-driven warfare of the Gulf War. The role of intelligence, technology, and innovation became increasingly central to military strategy, marking a profound shift in the nature of warfare. These events not only changed the course of their respective conflicts but also shaped the future of global military strategy, demonstrating the ever-increasing complexity and sophistication of modern warfare. As the 20th century progressed, the nature of combat would continue to evolve, with future wars increasingly defined by intelligence, precision, and technological superiority. As we draw this journey through history's greatest tactical battles to a close, it's clear that one unifying theme binds all these pivotal moments: innovation, strategy, and adaptability. These battles were not simply determined by sheer force or overwhelming numbers. In fact, history repeatedly shows us that the true turning points were those where commanders utilized their intellect, foresight, and the ability to adapt to ever-changing conditions on the battlefield. From the ancient tactics employed at the Battle of Marathon to the technological prowess seen in Desert Storm, these battles are not just stories of men at war, they are testaments to the human mind's capacity for brilliance in the face of adversity. Throughout time, warfare has evolved, but the principles of strategic thinking remain timeless. Whether through the double envelopment at Cannae, the brilliant feigned retreat at Hastings, or the strategic use of longbows at Agincourt, each of these victories illustrates the profound impact of innovation and outthinking your enemy. The greatest minds of history didn't just outfight their foes, they outthought them. They understood the terrain, the strengths and weaknesses of their enemies, and more importantly, they knew how to turn seemingly insurmountable obstacles into opportunities for victory. From ancient warfare to modern battles, it is this level of adaptability that remains a hallmark of success. The battles we've explored today also highlight a crucial lesson: brains always triumph over brawn. It's easy to think that brute strength and sheer numbers dictate the outcome of war, but as history has proven time and time again, the tactical brilliance of the leaders who can think several steps ahead and anticipate their enemies' moves is what wins wars. The Battle of Stalingrad wasn't won by the Soviet Union's superior numbers, but by their ability to outmaneuver and encircle the enemy. At Midway, it wasn't just the size of the fleets but the intelligence and surprise that left the Japanese fleet crippled. And in the Gulf War, the precision of modern technology and coordination demonstrated that even in the most advanced age, human ingenuity was the ultimate weapon. What we've learned from these historic moments is that adaptability and innovation are just as important in warfare as physical strength. Those who could innovate, think critically, and adapt to the changing dynamics of war were the ones who achieved lasting victories. In today's world, this lesson rings truer than ever. Whether we're facing personal challenges or professional obstacles, the ability to think strategically, adjust our approach, and stay ahead of the curve remains the key to success. As we close this chapter on some of history's most influential battles, remember that these victories were shaped by more than just soldiers on the front lines. They were the result of visionary leaders, brilliant tacticians, and everyday men and women who were able to adapt and overcome in the face of daunting odds. The triumphs we've explored today serve as a powerful reminder that the greatest weapon in any conflict, whether in war or in life, is the mind. So, as you reflect on the incredible tactical brilliance that shaped the course of history, take with you the most powerful lesson of all: the battle is often won long before the first sword is drawn. The key to success, whether in war or in any of life's challenges, is the ability to think critically, adapt, and innovate. And these timeless principles will continue to shape the future in ways we can only begin to imagine. If you found these deep dives into history's most tactical battles compelling, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that uncover the brilliance of human ingenuity and strategy. The lessons of the past continue to guide us, and there's much more to uncover about the pivotal moments that shaped the world as we know it. Stay tuned for more fascinating insights into the most strategic moments in history. Your journey through the greatest tactical battles is just beginning. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey through history's greatest tactical battles. I hope these stories of innovation, strategy, and human ingenuity have inspired you as much as they've fascinated me. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the pivotal moments that shaped the course of history, make sure to hit the like button, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. There's so much more to explore, whether it's powerful tactics, untold historical stories, or groundbreaking strategies that changed the world. Remember, history is full of lessons that can help us navigate the challenges of today. So, keep learning, keep thinking strategically, and keep challenging yourself. Don't forget to leave your thoughts in the comments below. What's your favorite tactical battle from history, and what lessons can we still apply today? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, stay curious, keep questioning, and never stop exploring. See you in the next video.